I've been thinking a lot lately about energy allocation and the role that it plays in my life, and specifically how to optimize how I allocate my energy to ensure that I live my most fulfilling life. Because when life gets really busy, for me personally, I take a lot of care, a lot of time in ensuring that I still have set blocks carved out throughout my day to ensure that I can reconnect with myself, to ensure that I have set periods that are just for stillness, for reconnecting with my body, for dropping out of my mind and seeing how I feel beneath it all, to ensure that I have those recovery periods that allow me to slow down, allow my nervous system to exhale, to ensure that I keep functioning in a way that's most optimal to myself. However, what I never gave consideration to previously was how sometimes those set recovery periods can become more of a strain or more of a burden on my body and my nervous system than not having them at all, which seems counterintuitive given that the purpose of those periods is to slow down, reconnect with myself, and help myself keep functioning optimally. Yet, what I found was that when too much rigor was applied to enforcing those recovery periods, or too much emphasis was placed by myself on ensuring that I still had, say, 1 hour to meditate, 30 minutes for sauna, 30 minutes for gym, those regular touch points, it became more of a source of stress and it became something else that my system had to manage, thereby adding more stress to my day. And it wasn't until I reflected after being in such a state of distress did I realize that I was making the mistake of automatically assuming that what I needed was set recovery times in order to slow down. But I realized that I made the mistake of assuming that what was most important after busy days was allowing enough downtime for my system to regulate. But the cost of that downtime meant that it was time that I did not spend on myself, time that I could not spend on other things, such as things that fundamentally lit up my system, things that I was passionate about. It was time spent recovering instead of creating, recovering instead of doing something exciting, and recovering instead of fundamentally living. And that's when I realized that sometimes energy allocation, while we may have the best intentions of ensuring that we have time to slow down, stop, and drop back into ourselves, sometimes too much emphasis on doing that actually stops us from living, and it stops us from gaining more energy through using that time for activities that fundamentally light us up, activities that ignite our soul, and activities that don't drain life, but fundamentally give us life, give us energy. And I didn't realize how easy it was to fall into that trap until my days were suddenly full with 8 hours of quite intense work. And I felt like the right thing to do was to focus on my recovery to ensure that I slow down. But if you think about it in terms of energy, when you're recovering, when you're slowing down, when you're meditating, when you're sitting outside, those activities are not necessarily things that inject a lot of energy back into your system. They're things that allow your system to fundamentally recover from the big day. They're things that allow you to reconnect with yourself, allow your system to exhale, but it's not always things that inject energy back into you, rather allow you to have the time to regenerate that energy yourself. And so for me, I found that instead of just focusing so much on recovery in terms of energy allocation and resource allocation, it became more important for me to ensure that I not only had those touch points within myself to ensure that I was slowing down, but also those touch points that meant that I was doing enough of the things that fundamentally ignited the spark within myself to ensure that I was not only allowing rejuvenation time, allowing my system to stabilize and decompress after the day, but also allowing time for my body or for my life to give me energy through ensuring that I was still doing things that lit me up. And so I guess it just came back to, for me anyway, understanding that my optimal resource allocation in terms of my energetic resources, which is fundamentally finite on a day-to-day basis, is not something that I need to protect as much as what I thought I did, because through protecting it so rigorously, it became another thing for my system to manage, when instead I need to ensure optimal balance between doing things that light me up every day to ensure that I'm injecting energy into my system, allowing time that's flexible to slow down, reconnect with myself, that allows me to restabilize, and then time that's spent where I'm out in life, focusing on maintaining my state of being, but it's not necessarily giving me energy nor draining me energy, just simply keeping neutral as I function and go about my day. So I guess for me, the core takeaway message that I learnt through lived experience was that recovery in itself can become a burden on my system if it's regulated and enforced too much, rather than allowing for flexibility and allowing for time spent on things that fundamentally light me up.